Welcome to the Amner Martinez podcast, a Des Moines, Iowa local-centric podcast. Since 2019, I've had the privilege and honor to speak with local politicians, chefs, musicians, athletes, authors, and more. In the 2025 season, we want you to walk away from this podcast knowing our local people in a different light and seeing them from different angles than you're used to. So stick around for interesting conversations. Welcome, everybody. My name is Amner Martinez with the Amner Martinez podcast, and my next guest is Dr. Kim, Richard Kim. He wrote a book, Confucianism in the Philosophy of Well-Being. So if you're into philosophy, talking about philosophy, this podcast is for you. This episode is for you. He is an assistant professor at Loyola University in Chicago, and he wrote this great book that I am deep into, and we talked about everything. We talked about religion, philosophy, virtues, morality, practical advice on how we can apply philosophy into the modern day life that we have here. So I recommend everybody to go. I believe it's on Amazon. Buy it. And I hope you enjoy this. Send me any questions that you have. Hopefully I'll hunt down another thinker, philosopher, author, and love to hear what you have to say and what your opinion is. So in these times, it appears that we need this type of conversations more than ever. So I hope everybody enjoy it. So here it is, Dr. Kim on the Amner Martinez podcast. Thank you for saying yes to this. I appreciate it. I'm humbled to, be talking to you. I've been kind of, as I put on my email, that I've been kind of curiously reading into some philosophers and a little bit, just kind of picking it up very amateur wise. So this is an exciting moment for me. So thank you. I guess my first question to you is, it appears that like philosophers of any region always talk about chaos and struggle and how to get centered and stuff. So it appears like that the world is always in chaos. It's always been around chaos. So we're not living anything different than other humans have. Is that accurate?
Yeah, there's definitely real truth to that, especially if you think of philosophy as embedded within a certain culture, within a certain historical context. So I think a lot of philosophical movements have started because people are trying to grapple with various challenges that they're facing. And human beings have always struggled. And we struggle in different ways, right? At different times, in different places. And it hasn't really gone away today. I mean, there's still all kinds of difficulties, loneliness, isolation, alienation that people experience now. People never had, smartphones back in the day. And so they didn't have to struggle with those sorts of things. Mm-hmm. But we do, or our children certainly do. But of course, in the 1500s, they were struggling with all kinds of disease, famine, in ways that were more pervasive than today. So, in a way, human beings, there's always a kind of a struggle. And I think in the modern world, our struggle is that there's a kind of partly a mismatch between sort of our evolved selves as biological creatures, right? Because I think we evolved to live in very small groups, like around 100 to 200 people. And now we live in these crazy places like America, where we have all these different people from different ethnicities, religious beliefs, moral values. And so, yeah, that's a kind of a modern issue that people have never faced. So there's all kinds of new challenges. But yeah, philosophy, you might think, comes out of a struggle. It could be also existential too, right? Like a personal struggle. Like you're trying to grapple with the reality of human suffering. Maybe you're going through all kinds of difficulties. But just to step back for a second, I actually would pitch philosophy, though, as in a way even more fundamental in that, yeah, so making sense of our struggles is part of it. But also, I think we all are philosophers in a sense. So that's how I think of it. So
Okay.
I try to get my students, a lot of them who are taking philosophy in an intro to philosophy class, because they have to, right? It's a core class, they call it. So they have to take it to graduate at the university where I teach, which is Loyola Chicago. And a lot of them, in the beginning don't want to be there. They're like, well, I got to do it. But I try to get them into it by showing them that, but there's a way in which even if they don't think that they like philosophy, they already have a philosophy. So everybody has a certain implicit background worldview. They have a certain conception of what matters, what's valuable, how you should act in the world. And everybody has that. I mean, unless you are a complete nihilist who thinks that nothing matters at all. I mean, that would be, well, that would be a sign of severe depression, I suppose. But most of us, we have a certain way that we see the world. There's a certain picture that we form as we get older. And, it's a little bit fuzzy. It's not all clear. We don't know how everything hangs together. But we have some implicit understanding of how the world works, how things come together, what life is about. And so what I try to show them is they already operate with a philosophy.
Yes.
And so what we're doing in the class is we're trying to sharpen their views and bring it to the front so that we can think about them.
Yeah, somebody said yesterday actually that like Jesus, they're like, we all have a relationship with Jesus, whether we believe in him or not, whether we believe that he exists or not. It has either been imposed onto us or like we believe in it, but somehow and maybe it is what you're saying, we're philosophizing on our daily lives, whether we are aware of it or not.
Yeah, we're trying to make sense of the world.
Right.
We're trying to make the world be understood by us, and which itself is a marvelous kind of feature of human beings, right? That we have this strange capacity, a power to make sense of the world. Right? Why is the world such that we can understand it to some extent, whether through science, whether through literature, whether through experience or human relationships? So that itself is an incredible fact about our own human existence, that our mind can, to some extent, match the world.
So your book is on Confucianism. So Confucianism and the philosophy of well-being.
Yes.
Can you give me a kind of one-on-one on who Confucius was, and like kind of what times was he? Did he live? Did he existed? And all that.
Yeah. So Confucius lived in the in early, what we call early China, in ancient China. He lived roughly between 551 and 479 BCE. So we're talking about about 2,500 years ago, and in a time called the Spring and Autumn period. This is a time when things were sort of falling apart in his culture. The previous dynasty, what's known as, or the time period known as, they call it the Western Zhou period, was a time that even historically, historians have uncovered that it was a fairly stable, peaceful time when people got along well. There was a good, caring ruler. But by the time Confucius came about, things were starting to really fall apart. There was more and more competition, greed, vying for power. And so the central authority of a virtuous king was kind of lost. And so I think Confucius, as he got older, he started to wonder, why are things so bad? Why is there so much violence, so much chaos? Why do people seem to have bad human relationships? And so I think he was a very intelligent, very diligent inquirer. So I think he read the ancient texts, and he came to think that there were several elements that are fundamental to human life that was missing, that they used to have back in the previous culture. One was ritual, so ritual practice. That's really important for Confucianism. Another is, we might just call it virtue, or like moral power. And he thought that virtue especially was so central to a good human life, and that the new rulers and the people with power lacked virtue. And so therefore, things were just going to gradually fall apart. So those are just, and maybe one more thing would be like family. So Confucians think families are sort of the backbone of a society. And so children and parents form one of the most important human relationships. And so families needed to be healthy and harmonious if a society was to function well.
Do you think, and I'm sure you get this a lot, like what would Confucius think in these times? Because harmonious society was kind of what the end result of what his teachings were, right? Through ritual and practicing. It doesn't feel harmonious right now. And how can one use philosophy in these times, or how can one use Confucianism in these times?
It's a good question. First of all, I don't think there's ever a kind of a magic bullet, or a single solution to anything really. The challenges and the problems we have today are extremely complicated. People like to think, oh, there's just this one solution. If we just got this one part right, everything would fall into place. I don't think that's probably true. I think there's a multifaceted, numerous issues that kind of are tangled together. I suppose Confucius himself would be pretty dismayed by what's going on. And when we say, the problems, Amner, you mean like in contemporary America, like
sure, yes,
because we live here, right?
Right, yes.
Because the world is big and there's all kinds of different problems in different places. Yeah, but you're right. Like in America, we have these deep political rifts that seem to have only deepened, polarization, and I don't know. Your sort of a background or where exactly you grew up, but. So I moved from South Korea. So I was born in America, but I lived in Korea with my parents until about 7 or 8. And then so I remember growing up as a kid in America, and I remember being able to hang out with my friends like all day long. We would bicycle, on our own. And I was 8 years old. And I remember just people being... So I wouldn't say like people are different in the sense that like now we're like more mean or something. Like human nature is, I think, pretty much the same. But there was a sense of greater trust, it seemed. Like people seemed to be less fearful. I think like one thing that I noticed is I think neighbors are a little bit more worried or scared about deepening their relationships with people in the neighborhood, because one reason is because people have such different political views now that you don't know what your neighbor holds. Like when you greet them on a Sunday morning and you smile and they smile at you, everything's fine. But then imagine like a very people have two very different political views. Then they get into a conversation. It can so easily get derailed and kind of ugly. And I think people don't even want that either. So I think sadly there is this kind of I don't know, even in communities, there's kind of a rift. It's just hard for people to feel in harmony with their local, the local people. And I think maybe one idea of Confucianism that maybe I would advocate is like starting local. So like I do think we should, and you can only do things, I mean, you can't make anyone do anything, but you can at least try to cultivate like a deeper bond to your local neighbors, and build a community. And you can do that partly by respecting the rituals, the rituals of like respect, politeness, like kind of a civility, right? And I think a little bit of tact. We don't want to necessarily jump into heated conversations about religion and politics, even though over time I think we have to talk about those things because we want to be like honest and we want to have good conversations, honest conversations. But I think still in the beginning, it's so important to form that trust and some level of friendship, that like, hey, I greet you. I'm your neighbor. I'm here for you. And we do that we accomplish that, I think, through those rituals, like greeting. You smile at the person, you shake their hands.
These are teachings of Confucius, right? Like we think of rituals as the bigger rituals, right? Like marriage, and ceremonies. But Confucius, and you're saying the smaller rituals, or I don't know if they should be considered small because they can make a big impact. You can change somebody's day if you smile at them, right? And you say hello with like a good energy, and you can pass that energy to them. You can change their whole day. So you're talking about those rituals.
Yeah, I mean, so for the Confucians, the Chinese concept is li, and that notion covered all kinds of things, including the ceremonies, obviously, like the weddings and the funerals, large-scale ceremonies. But they also covered your everyday etiquette, like greetings. And in some ways, I'd like to emphasize that because, we can do that every day, right? Like that's one of the things I try to teach my students. Maybe it's not like, really complicated philosophy, but there's a depth to that. Because I asked them if they've ever experienced a time when someone didn't greet them, So imagine like, this person, maybe you're even on friendly terms. Maybe he's even your friend or she's your friend. And like you say hi and that person just walks right by you.
Yes.
It will weigh on you. You might think, but of course, from another point of view, you might think, but what's the big deal? It's just a little hi, right? But that it is a big deal, which is in really interesting issue in itself, right? Because why does that little like smile and saying hi matter that much? And I think what the Confucians understood well, what Confucius himself understood, was psychology. I think he really picked up on what people really want. And one of the things that they want is a sense of respect. We need to feel that someone sees us, I think that's part of it, which is when you greet someone, you're showing them that you see that person as a human being. And so that little gesture is enormously important because when that does not happen, you can feel slighted and you can feel that you've been disrespected. And deep inside, I think we all need that. We need kind of a confirmation, Those things really matter and they're very deep and it's not trivial. And so that's one of the things that I bring up, at least in my class for my students.
So, because it's going to specifically, right, we live in the U.S. I come from Guatemala. I experienced the same thing, like growing up in Guatemala in the early 80s, as a young, 3, 4, 5 years, 6, 7, 8-year-old. There was a lot more trust in the neighborhoods. There was a neighborhoodly feel to, you knew everybody knew you. The other mothers would take care of the kids while other mothers are, but here in the United States, some people don't even know, like, they know who they are, but like they rarely talk. or they rarely
They don't
say
even know
hello.
the name.
They're
Like,
yes.
yeah.
So I'm sure right now there's a lot of people that, this going back to the political, I'm not trying to make this a political thing, but within families, right? Like Thanksgiving was already hard because family drama alone, right? But now there's this distance, because now if you are on that side, then now you're, it just kind of, there's a big canyon between family members. Is there I'm sure there is, but like the question I guess is like, what can we practice in that situation where there's a canyon in between people that you love and respect, and you're so confused about it, about their choices or their opinions, and they're like how they are going about in this. I guess I'm prolonging the question, but what can we do there?
Yeah. I mean, one thing you could do is you could still perform the rituals, right? You can, even if you're a little bit upset by what your crazy uncle just said, you could still just smile, and you don't have to put up necessarily like this big, fuss. You could still try to maintain the peace. Now, some people might wonder, oh, is that being inauthentic though? Oh, aren't you just like kind of hiding your true feelings? I get that. I think I used to think more like that, and there's some truth to it. But I think the Confucians would have said, well, no, I mean, obviously things are not perfect there, but you act as if, you really care about your uncle, and hopefully you do. And then so you still perform the ritual behavior. And then maybe over time, after you build up enough, of a good relationship, right? And then you can maybe eventually have a nice conversation with your uncle and show him why you might disagree or whatnot. But yeah, at Thanksgiving, it's still good to have that, at least that sense that, you're behaving well. I mean, people care still how you behave, even if like that person may not totally feel it. You still, you it's how you act still matters, on the outside. So I think that's right. Also, you brought up Jesus. I mean, maybe you have resources from internal to your own religious tradition. Like if you're Christian, then you think, well, God is, every human being is an image of God. And so there's a kind of a deep foundational dignity and worth in every person, even the craziest uncle. and so there's a way in which they still deserve love. And of course, we're human beings. We're not Christ. So we may not be able to pull it off, and I guess none of us fully do. But that gives you another way in, to kind of see, like, you got to step back and go, this person, Jesus would still love. So that's a kind of a Christian, way of maybe handling that situation.
So it's kind of like stay the course and let it write it out, maintain the rituals, and eventually.
I think the Confucians would say that. I think Christianity goes a little bit even more. There's more of a challenge, which is you should still love your uncle in the most compassionate, caring way. I do think different religious traditions have different levels of, I mean, they have different forms of advice in different situations. I think the Confucians would say, keep the peace, perform the ritual, and maybe find a better context to air out your frustration. I think the calling of the Christians, or calling from Jesus, would be, you gotta forgive and love. Yeah.
Is that because the more I read, there's the word flourishing kind of is used a lot in philosophy.
Mm-hmm.
Can you help me understand why that? I mean, I guess it makes sense to like the definition of how I've used it. So I think I understand, but why that word specifically? Why flourishing? Why not growth? Why not evolution? Or why not something that or just that's a word that it sounds better or what?
Yeah. Yeah, I like the word flourishing. You know, the history behind this word is in a way, okay, so there's this word happiness that used to be more widely used
Okay.
to talk about, especially the ancient Greek philosophy about, like, say, Aristotle. Aristotle was one of the best ancient Greek philosophers. And people used to think of what he thought of as happiness. But happiness, sometimes people think it's too subjective. Like, it just has to do with like a certain fleeting, pleasurable feeling. And so I think people thought, no, Aristotle and the philosophers, the ancient philosophers, didn't have in mind just like a fleeting moment, but they had in mind like a really good human life, and a human life that exemplifies, all kinds of human excellences. Like, I mean, I think like for them, a good human life is one where, you have your physical body that goes well, your emotional self, your social self, and your intellectual self. And so the thought is, I think the word flourishing is used by some people like me because if you think of like a plant, right? We can think of other organisms or plants or trees as flourishing. And so one way that you can think of, think about this is, what is it for any living organism to flourish? Well, that depends on their nature, right? So like an owl can see in the dark, right? You and I cannot, except with, high-tech binoculars.
Yeah.
But an owl needs to see in the dark to flourish. We don't have to. That's because an owl nature is different from human nature. And so what it is for an owl, a tree, a dog to flourish depends on the kind of nature they have. And so I like this way of thinking about it because now we can ask, well, what is it for a human being to flourish? Well, now we have to think about, what is human nature? Like, what are we? Like, what kind of creatures are we? Well, we don't have to see in the dark, but we're social animals, so you need friendships. We have a mind, an intellect, so we have to develop our mind and intellect to flourish. So I like that term because it anchors it in facts about human beings. And so, it's not just like theory. It's a way to understand, a bit more concretely what it is to achieve a good life.
So we live in the Western world, and this is Confucianism is Eastern philosophy, right? Do you think that the West kind of has soaked in, I guess, the Confucian philosophy? If yes, then is it like, I don't know if the answer to that, but if it isn't, why isn't why does it not fit into the Western world?
You mean you're asking, to what extent has the Western world absorbed ideas from Confucianism?
Yes.
And also, I think there was a second question there about, does it fit well, or is there something that is really different, right? Is there kind of a chasm?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's an interesting question that I've thought a long time about. One thing that I do like to say is, okay, so we could talk about Confucianism specifically, but and it's part of the Eastern, philosophical religious tradition. But of course, what I like to say is there's no like the Eastern idea, because there's just a multitude of competing different traditions and ideas, and people disagree, right? Even in the East, there's Taoism, there's Buddhism, there's Confucianism, and so they disagree amongst themselves. Like the Confucians and the Taoists have disagreed about various fundamental issues, and so have the Buddhists. And there's other traditions too, and even in the West, I mean, like sometimes people say, "Oh, the Western view," you know. I'm like, I'm not sure what that is. What is the Western view? You know, like you can go to California, you can go to New York City, you can go to Des Moines, Iowa. You can go. You can talk to the Amish. You could talk to Islamic Americans, or Hispanic Catholics. I mean, it's so diverse too. You know, the West. So it's difficult to know. Like it just feels like in America we just have so many different cultures, and so there's a kind of it's hard to pin down. You know, I mean, we could talk about specific religions like Judaism or Catholicism or Islam, but like it's hard to know like what exactly we mean. I think people are more respectful and open to learning. I do think that's true. I think more philosophers I've encountered who knew only about Western philosophy are a bit more open to ideas from Eastern traditions, which is good. I think it's good to learn from different traditions that's not familiar, and so I think some absorption has taken place. I do think there are some ideas, let's say specifically in Confucianism, that does feel a little bit maybe alien or strange. Like filial piety is so huge in Confucianism. So filial piety has to do with like respect for your parents, and also as an extension, respect for your elders, let's say. When people in the West, like you ask them, oh, what's an important value? Nobody would really say filial piety, right? That's not something I've never heard any student say that in at least in the 20 years I've taught in America. But in East Asia, at least, like in Korea, China, Japan, that's a significant value, and so it's that's an important value that has influenced that society, and so that would be kind of one sort of difference. And related to that would be, I think in Confucianism, it's not the individual that's like the ultimate source of authority, but like it's the family. So the family is the ultimate unit of a society. It's not the individual person.
Right.
So the families make collective choices, and they think of that as like one unified kind of entity. So that's a kind of different way of seeing the world, I think.
Is it possible? Because some people say that it's like because the Western world is more like rule, laws, punishment, and I mean, I guess some countries have adapted some of the Western like structure of government and like laws and parliaments and governments and stuff like that, but I guess that was my kind of curiosity. Like it seems like here is more Christian, Catholic, more like religion than philosophy.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think, well, first of all, religious allegiance has decreased quite a bit in America too. Just like in Europe, there's been a real decline of religious participation, like the number of people who go to church or even synagogue, I suppose, or maybe mosque. So more and more people now identify as non-religious than they used to. So it's a little bit difficult to know how much religion shapes contemporary culture. I mean, of course, there's very devout religious people in America too. Yeah, I mean, philosophy, of course, again, like as I think of philosophy, which is like an implicit like worldview you hold about what values, what matters, how things come together. Everyone has that. So there's a way in which I guess I would still say that philosophy influences us. But yeah, you're right. Maybe most people don't do philosophy, right? It's not like people don't, or maybe people just don't necessarily reflect that much on like, what sort of life am I living? Like, but I don't know. I'm not entirely sure myself. This is an interesting question. Like, for most ordinary Americans, how often do they kind of step back and think about their own life? Like, how often do they go, yeah, like, is my life going well? You know, what is it like that I'm pursuing? What's the purpose? What's the meaning behind my life? Maybe most people do have those thoughts. I'm not sure. I think at some level, people probably do have it because human beings are self-conscious creatures, right? That's one of the unique, strange things about us. Like, you know about yourself. You have some sense of your own death. You know that you have some self-awareness. We have consciousness, as they call it, which makes us really interesting, special, and unique. And so, but of course, that also makes things very difficult. And sometimes that's the cause of anxiety, about our future, about our own death. But to what extent, philosophy plays a role in human life? I mean, I think it still plays a role, but active philosophy, I'm not sure. Maybe people are just being too absorbed by TikTok and social media, and they're not thinking enough.
I think it just takes a little bit of contemplation.
Yes, that's a good word.
Because, like you said earlier, it's like we are like, whether we are aware of it or not, there's a philosophy in how we live. Like, you might not be aware of it, but there's guiding principles, right? That you're kind of performing or you're going about your days. So my next question is religion and philosophy, is it all in one? Are they separate?
Yeah, I mean, people give different answers to that, of course. I think people used to think of them as more sharply divided. I do get the sense that people are a bit more open to seeing them as more integrated, or because, about 15 years ago, maybe 20 years ago, there was a kind of movement in America, I guess maybe also in Europe. It was called the new atheism. And so there were these like important intellectuals like Sam Harris. I don't know if you know these figures.
Christopher
Hitchens.
Hitchens, yes.
And Daniel Dennett. They were called the Four Horsemen. And they were, I don't know if you've ever read.
I'm a big fan of Christopher Hitchens.
Oh, Christopher, he's a superb writer, really funny.
Debater too.
Very good debater. And they were like real atheists. They thought, clearly God didn't exist. And they were pretty dismissive. They thought religions were just kind of
evil.
Like really horrible and just a leftover from a very primitive time. And only people who didn't know enough science or weren't smart were religious.
Right.
But actually that movement has really declined quite a bit. Part of it is, first of all, it's just not true. There's a lot of very smart, brilliant people who actually love science, who are very religious. So I think, it can't just be like, oh, if you like are science-minded and
it's not black and white.
No, it's just not. Yeah, and I think people realize also religion plays such an important role for so many people that to dismiss it quite like that, as if you're just some fool, is, first of all, it's not practically a good move. Like, you're just going to offend too many people. And also, it actually makes sense of their lives. Like, do you really want to deprive people of something important to them? And finally, I think there are like arguments for the existence of God. It might not be completely persuasive to people, but it's not, I don't think it's quite as stupid or ignorant as people thought. There are philosophical arguments for the existence of God. And of course, philosophical arguments against the existence of God as well, which I teach both. But I think actually, no, I think religion and philosophy can go together, but they are different. I don't want to say that they're the same thing.
Some philosophers believed in God.
Oh yeah, there's a lot of philosophers who believe in God, even today. But classically, I mean, most philosophers and scientists believed in God. I mean, Newton did, Galileo did. These were extraordinary minds. Descartes. I mean, Aristotle believed in something like God. I mean, part of this the question is what we mean by God. But of course, right? And Augustine, Thomas Aquinas, brilliant Islamic philosophers like Avicenna, Averroes. I mean, across different religious traditions too. They thought, they had arguments for why God exists. They actually gave reasons for their views.
Is the Tao, the great integrity, is basically like God, right? Like God. Is that? Am I close to that?
The Tao, or
yeah,
the Tao it's a little bit tricky. It's people. I mean, different Eastern thinkers think of the Tao in different ways. Some more metaphysical, some more ethical. But right, like in the Tao Te Ching of Lao Tzu, right? The Tao is, it's like a kind of it's a very metaphysical kind of, it's hard to say what it is. It's called like non-being,
sure.
Right? The source of all, source of everything. There's some overlap there, right? From in let's say the Judeo-Christian Islamic view that God is the source, the foundation of everything. There's a sense, there's a kind of idea there that you find in some Eastern traditions that the Tao is like also the source of all life, right? So there's some overlap. I mean, one difference is that I think, like, at least in the Judeo-Christian Islamic tradition, God is also the creator. You get less of that, I think, in the Eastern religious traditions. And also God cares about you personally, like Jesus, right? Jesus loves each person. I don't think you find that in the Tao Te Ching of Lao Tzu.
Right.
Yeah, or the Taoist
What about
tradition.
Confucius? Did he believe in God?
Confucius believed in what's sometimes called heaven. And so I think he believed that there is some kind of transcendent spiritual power. It's not entirely clear exactly what he thought. It's a little bit open-ended and vague. He thinks there is some kind of deity. It seems, people argue about this, but he definitely didn't. He thought he was much more this worldly though. I mean, he thought, okay, there might be spiritual beings, but we should worry about how to live your life well here and now, cultivate the virtues, become a good person. So he said, in one of the famous passages, he says, don't worry about, life after death or, about ghosts or spiritual like entities, worry about your life now.
So how would Confucius answer this question? Like, am I my brother's keeper?
Oh yeah, that's from Cain and Abel. I think he would say, of course you are.
Right.
Of course, because you have a bond. You have a natural bond to care about your brother. That's just given. I think the other thing that, maybe this is one point that also is a little bit different from sometimes a modern way of thinking about things. I think a lot of people in the modern Western world especially think you only have a duty or responsibility if you voluntarily choose that, right? So someone might go, oh, but I didn't choose to have my brother, right? And so I didn't choose up that duty. I never promised anything. I think the Confucians would say, that's not the way it works. You have a brother, and it's a fact. And whether you like it or not, you have certain responsibilities to your brother. It's not because you chose it, but it's because it's part of the given fact of who you are. It's part of your identity. Whereas I think some people in the West think of our identity as much more like freely chosen. Like I get to construct myself. Whereas I think the Confucians thought, you get to make choices and, direct your life, but certain parts of you are just there. Like you're the child of your parents, whether you chose it. And of course we didn't, right? we didn't choose who to be born to. But sometimes we have these responsibilities, right? Like if you come across a child that's a total stranger, and that child is like drowning, you didn't choose that, but surely you have a responsibility, right? So I actually think people overemphasize the way in which like you can make these free choices to decide whether you're accountable or responsible. I think parts of our lives are just given to us, and we come to exist in a world where we're already bonded to other people and we have moral responsibility.
I like what I highlighted something on your books. I'm going to read it, but I want to see if you can elaborate on that. It says, we ought to pursue a cross-cultural understanding of well-being and moral psychology by taking seriously reflections from a variety of moral traditions. It appears that is needed more than ever now.
Yeah, I think that's a very good thing to do, because we do live in this globalized world, right? I think we now know that, like, although I don't know if everyone people don't seem to think about it enough, but we now know that we're just so entangled, right? I mean, a little virus that spread, and who knows exactly why, in Wuhan, China, right, in 2020, or I guess 2019, somehow it was inevitable that it spread through the world and eventually made it all the way across the world to the US, right? So no, we're not these self-contained islands. We're like exposed, and we live together. And what's hard is we do have different views and different values sometimes and different beliefs. But I do think understanding other cultures throughout the world, like in a deeper way, I do think that that's a strong recipe for a more harmonious society. Because, like if you go to other cultures, like if you have these, views about, I don't know, some people maybe have something about like Russia, like, oh, I don't like Russia, but you go there and you meet the people and you try really good Russian food. I've never had any, but yeah, I imagine it. Sure. And maybe you learn of their history, right? Their beautiful novels, right? Of like Dostoevsky and Tolstoy. And you see some of their music and art, and you taste their food. I mean, and you form human bonds. And how could you continue to just have this one-sided view, And I think we can extend that across all traditions, culture in Africa or, South America or anywhere really. I mean, I think that's why, understanding other cultures is really, one of the reasons why it's very important.
Also, philosophy is, you write here, is the love of wisdom. Or that's what you tell your students. Like, the philosophy is the love of wisdom. And you also make a contrast between knowledge and wisdom. Am I right here? Because you write, a wicked person might have a lot of knowledge and be dangerously effective in wielding it, but we would be unwilling to call such person wise. Yeah,
you could imagine someone very intelligent, right? Very sharp, can like think very quickly, knows a lot. But that person might be very morally corrupt and maybe looking to destroy and get power for himself, right? That's not wisdom, right? Wisdom has to do with a deeper understanding of what matters, what's valuable. It has to do with, moral virtues and human excellence. And so we think of wisdom as more profound, right? So like a scientist who knows a lot about chemistry. I mean, by the way, that's a good thing. That's a great thing. But I don't think they have wisdom necessarily, right? Wisdom is like a deeper, more systematic understanding of the world, of ourselves, about what matters, and getting those things right. So yeah, I mean, of course, I'm offering a certain way of seeing the world, but I think some things do matter more than others. Like you can waste your life on trivial things, just trying to look good, You can, or you might come to think, wow, like friendships and family and helping others. I mean, those are much more important human goods. And so those are deeper. I mean, so you might think there's a difference between what's deeper and more shallow, right? And I think there is a real difference there. Yeah, I think that's the difference between wisdom and just knowledge.
And can you help me understand too, like the difference here of like theories and practice, or like actually living it?
Mm-hmm.
Because there's such thing as just talking about it, right? And then there's also like the practicing the.
So there's theories. So philosophers tend to like theories, right? It's an account of what unifies something. So like, a theory of flourishing, someone might offer, right? And someone might say, actually, here's one theory. It's called hedonism. Hedonism is a theory of human flourishing, which says ultimately the only thing that's good for us is pleasure, and what's bad is pain. So that's a theory, right? So theories are meant to be like sort of systematic accounts or explanations of a certain kind of important topic, right? But then the practice would be like our the way we act in the world to, let's say, realize some human good. As you go about your life, your daily life, you're practicing possibly some value.
And do you think that philosophy should be taught like at an earlier stage of life, or not wait until higher education?
I think it should be taught earlier. I think what's difficult is it takes time and human experience to kind of understand certain philosophical topics, though.
Okay.
Like, it's hard for a 10-year-old to know about flourishing. But still, I have children. I don't know if you have children. I have 4 kids, actually. I have a 11-year-old and a 9-year-old and a 3 and a 2-year-old. But my 11-year-old, my oldest daughter, I bring up philosophy here and there.
Yeah.
I'll ask, so, what do you think is important, this summer? Like, what would be something important for you to try to do this summer? Or she asked me about Ukraine and Russia. Yeah, she's like,
wild.
because I guess in their class they were debating whether America should support Ukraine. Yeah, and she brought up that topic, and of course it has to get into philosophy. It has to get into questions about war and what justifies, the deaths of innocent people, and
moral questions.
I mean, these are hard issues, and and of course people disagree, but we have to think about those questions. I mean, I guess we can choose not to, right? We can just kind of shut ourselves off and think, these are too hard, but I do think as humans we all ought to think about them, and that's why talking about these things is good. I think it's still important.
Yeah. What's the Confucius philosophy like of hierarchy, or like is there anything like within the family, I guess?
Yeah, no, they definitely have a hierarchical view. There are certain roles with a hierarchy. So some of the hierarchies, of course, like here, I mean, we wouldn't want to accept anymore. I mean, there's some sense of like there's a hierarchy, let's say among like they say distinction. So like there's a distinction between husband and wife. I don't know if they would say hierarchy, but certainly between father and son, there's a hierarchy. They say, of course, like teacher and student, there's a hierarchy. I think like actually that's an interesting point to bring up, because I think people in the modern West tend to be more worried about hierarchies.
Okay.
Because we care a lot about equality, right? And there's something to that. But at the same time, I do think hierarchies are necessary. So some hierarchies are bad, right? They could be corrupting, but I would say between like a husband and wife, there shouldn't be a hierarchy. That's not the right way to think about it, let's say. But like a teacher and student, there is a hierarchy because I give the grades. I have to because I'm
Right.
supposedly the one who should know more.
Right.
And so, or like a judge, right? There's a kind of a hierarchy there. And so the hierarchy isn't itself what's wrong. It's whether it has a important role and if it's built on actual differences in excellence, because a judge is well trained, hopefully, right, and not corrupt, and a teacher hopefully had the training to be able to be a good teacher, and so they're built on facts of differentiation, right? We don't all know the same thing, right? Like I submit to the advice of my doctor, let's say, or my plumber, and so because I don't know about plumbing or being or medicine well enough as them. So there's nothing wrong with that, like authority and so on. It's just that when people become corrupt and they exercise that authority oppressively, that's when things go badly.
This is a question that I'm afraid to ask, but it is very simple actually. Like once you start reading philosophy, the language starts to get a little bit harder. And I could say, I would say there's an argument to be made that like, the average human, the education level or like the linguistic level is, subpar, I guess. And is there, how can, like, let's say somebody that is interested in getting into philosophy or wanting to read more into it, what's a good way to go into it without getting overwhelmed by the language?
That's a good question. Yeah, because philosophy comes in different forms, and there is like an academic philosophy that gets very difficult, very technical. It just wouldn't be something that would be of interest to like people who haven't really studied philosophy. But of course, that's true of like every discipline, right? I mean, if you enjoy chemistry, but once you get deeply into it, it becomes very technical. There's words being used in a very specific technical way. And that's just how things work for everything. But yeah, no, I think that's why there's a need for a kind of a popular philosophy, right? So philosophy that is more accessible to people. There are books like that out there, like more popular philosophy books. I would have to think about what would be good ones. I mean, but there are like some good popular philosophy. I mean, sometimes it can be bad, but I think there are. If you search, there's some good ways in for people who are interested in philosophical ideas without necessarily possessing like, or wanting to get into the really detail, like the technical parts of it, which I don't blame them. I mean, everyone has a job or they have to do something else. And so, but I would encourage exploring that. I mean, you can really get interested in these basic issues. Of course, I would say I'm able to teach in a more basic way to my students because they're not like philosophy majors. So I'm trying to find ways to attract them to philosophy, and they're majoring in something else. They might be computer science. They might be nursing. They might be business. And so I try to package the philosophical questions in a way that they can understand.
Sure. Yeah, I'm super curious to see if you have a thought about the phases that one goes through when they're getting into like, just dabbling into like the philosophy or philosophies or just discovering philosophers and reading into them. I personally felt like there was some kind of a sense of like um, excuse me, it was a sense of a mirror almost. I'm like it makes you reflect inside, within you, or like it makes you reflect to think like, oh, who am I then? What am I like? How am I behaving on a daily basis? You've been studying. I mean, you wrote the book. Uh, is there like something to be said about like what phases there is in once you get into reading this and maybe practicing it and discovering more?
You said phases. You mean like, are
Yeah,
there different stages
right, right, right,
as you
right.
get into philosophy?
Because can you kind of start being too like righteous when you when you start to read more and more and more, and then you start like you want to practice it, right? Because you don't just want to be reading about it. um I felt that a little bit. I'm like, I'm reading it, but then if I talk about it, then I'm starting to sound like I'm some righteous being or something, which is not, like the opposite of you're trying to do.
Oh, I see.
um
Oh, wait, righteous as in you mean like you feel kind of arrogant in
no, no,
talking
no,
about
not arrogant,
philosophy?
but
Oh,
like, let's, for example, with my wife, right? Like, um if I'm reading something, I want to tell her what I read,
right.
right? And I'm like, oh, look,
Yeah.
this is good for us. This is good for the kids. And then it could come off as if there's this, I know more, or I know this, and you should too. Maybe, I don't know. Maybe it's just me, but I thought maybe if there
Yeah.
was a question in there. I don't know if there is one. But like
Yeah.
you're a teacher, so I guess you have the position of authority, so you can talk about it.
I mean, I have to talk about it,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
They
So
make me
maybe
talk about it. But
yeah,
with
cause
other people, you mean like ordinary people? I
yeah,
mean,
yeah,
I
yeah,
wouldn't
yeah.
just all of a sudden start bringing up questions about free will, on supermarket, checkout line. All of a
Yeah,
sudden I asked them, have you been thinking about your
yeah,
life? That would make me very obnoxious. But
yeah.
I mean, when you're talking to your wife over like a meal, and of course, like, it depends on your tone and how you bring it up. But if you'd
Sure.
say, oh, like I read this book and here, I thought it was really interesting question, like about human happiness or flourishing. I mean, I think that's perfectly fine.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, I think philosophy has its own like everything, right? There's a certain context to bring up issues and questions. Maybe philosophy kind of happens like late at night with your buddies, as you're pondering existential, or if you're going through some kind of, your friend's going through a divorce or something, and you start talking about, I don't know,
Yeah.
yeah, or maybe there's a kind of a health scare, maybe your friend found out that, oh, like he has a tumor or something, right? I mean, things like that happen where
Mm-hmm.
I think it kind of interrupts our ordinary life.
Mm-hmm.
And then maybe sometimes those are openings in which maybe we're given. I mean, I guess nobody wants that, right? Nobody wants to see a tumor or have to go through
Mm-hmm.
chemo or have someone that they love die or get sick. But those are opportunities where maybe we're forced to step back and kind of think a bit more about what matters, and not just go through the daily routine. So those are openings for, I think, philosophical questions.
Your book is part of a series of books, correct?
Yeah.
So it's a fascinating book, and the more I read into it, I gotta read lines two or three times. But I'm glad that I was able to run into you at this event here in Des Moines, and you were kind enough to share your contact, and here we are. So sometimes, I'm kind of a universality type of person where it's like, yeah, that's kind of how things are flowing for me. So I'm very grateful for this conversation. But for the most part, what would you like for people to take away from your book?
Um, what would I like? I mean, I would hope that they it made them think about certain ideas about, what would help them live a better human life, right? A happier, more flourishing, more fulfilled human life. And there are elements of that the Confucians really thought were vital to any good human life, including like a good family, good human relationships, obviously. And I think in some ways they're obvious. I mean, I think without them, we won't do well. But the Confucians were, above all, especially interested in moral virtue. They thought, we all have different talents, and we all have different abilities, and maybe some of us will become wealthy, but some of us are just gonna, maybe not make much money. Who knows, right? But no matter who you are, at any point in your life, you can try to become like a good human being, like to be as within the circumstances of your life, like a generous, compassionate, thoughtful, courageous, concerned about justice and what's right. No matter who you are, you can always aspire to that. And I think they thought, no matter who you are, well, I don't know if they're quite right about this, but basically for all of us, we do want to think of ourselves as decent people. Like I don't think anybody can quite handle thinking of themselves as a bad human being. So one of the most important, fulfilling parts of your life will be when you're like old and maybe dying, whether you really did try to at least be a good person. If you really thought, no, I cheated people, I was dishonest, and I just was extremely self-interested and selfish, I think those will haunt you, and you will not be able to find fulfillment. So I think the Confucians thought that's one thing that's always in your control to some extent. Like that can be, you can incorporate that at any point in your life,
Because
and that will be fulfilling.
Because by nature we are good.
That's according to at least some Confucians.
Yeah. Because nobody wants to be like, yeah, I'm a bad person.
We have a desire also for self-respect. You want to be able to think of yourself as a good person. And we do have some aspects of ourselves that as good. Like compassion is kind of natural, Empathy to some extent is natural. So I think that's one of those things that will always be with you as you mature, become old, And it's one of the things you also appreciate. Like when you see someone, I mean, I don't know if you saw that, but in Australia, there was this guy who, I don't know if you saw this video, but you can watch it on YouTube or wherever. He went up to one of the gunmen that was killing, right, shooting at people, I think at a beach. It was a party for, I think, like a Jewish party.
Yeah.
And this guy, I think he's from Syria. I think he's Muslim. And he just tackled him and took the gun away. And he got shot several times while doing it. And so he really, truly risked his life.
Right.
And you can watch interviews of him, and he said he just could not bear more people getting shot and dying. And he just thought it's just wrong for innocent people to get murdered like that. So he risked his life, and now he, I think he has some paralysis. He can't really feel his fingers, but he said he would do it again. I mean, that's a kind of heroism, like an incredible kind of human beauty, right? That like a moral beauty. That's what I think inspires us. And like we all die, we all get sick, and like how much more meaningful is that, right? Being able to live like that. Now, I mean, of course, hopefully we'll never have to experience that possibility, because it's better if it never happens. But there's ways in which we're all gifted with those opportunities to be a little bit more caring, or to, we have a chance to do what's right at different times. And I think that's what the Confucians thought was the true ingredient of a really deeply satisfying human life.
Why do you think that we seek it? Like, do we seek philosophy or religion when we are in peril, or um, like, is, for example, New Year, right? Like New Year's, at least the Western, right? Like whoever celebrates the end of the year, they want to kind of new year, new me, and
Right. Yeah. Resolution.
resolutions and stuff like that. Is there a specific time in that we as humans search for this higher kind of purpose, I guess, or just higher learning?
Like a spiritual yearning.
Yeah.
I think it can happen certainly when we experience some kind of dramatic event like the loss of a parent or something. It can also happen sometimes, I think, out of gratitude. You know, maybe you're just so grateful. I've had those experiences where you feel like your life is so beautiful in so many ways, and you have this deep desire to express gratitude. Some people think that's an argument for why maybe, you know, belief in God is reasonable, because who are you going to be grateful toward? I mean, I guess some people might say the universe, but that's kind of weird. But the universe doesn't really care about you, right?
Yeah.
But if God created a world, you know, and designed the world and you to have a certain life, then you could be grateful toward God. That's why people, you know, give thanks before meals. But yeah, so that can happen. But certainly, I think you're right that traumatic, difficult, like real challenges, times when we feel like we're just not enough, you need something like outside of you to give you assistance. Classically, that's like God, right? And you pray for God's help. I think, yeah, those are like moments of like a kind of experience of spirituality that I think happens to a lot of people. Not everyone, but a lot of people.
Is there an age though? Like, was it Darwin that said that there was a stage where man searches for more? Like, is that why we go through like what is very commonly known as a midlife crisis?
Yeah, yeah, I'm at that age. Yeah.
Are you familiar with the stages that Darwin? I think I read it somewhere, but
no, I'm not familiar with Darwin's point there. I'll have to look into that. Like he thought that at a certain point in your life,
right, like a certain age period where like we search for something. I was in jail under immigration detention like 12 years ago or something like that, and I experienced that. In that time, I was there for almost 3 months, and like I looked around and I saw people going to the Bible a lot, you know. So it was very interesting to see that that it was like you're searching when you're in your lowest point. But I guess that's what it works, right? Like we need to be saved or something. Or,
yeah. No, I think that's what a lot of people with severe addictions, right? They can sometimes become very religious, like Alcoholics Anonymous. There's a kind of there's a step there where you say you're like kind of you've realized that you're powerless and you need to rely on a higher power. I mean, I think that that at the end of the day, what has been so powerful about the figure of Jesus Christ is that he's, according to the theology, the Christian theology, he died for you, right? And it doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter if you're like a convict, if you've done horrible things, if you're rich or if you're poor, whoever you are. According to this view, you know, God truly cares about you and loves you. And you could be in jail and die there, and still at least you have this tremendous love by God, you know, poured out by God. And I think that is an extraordinarily powerful idea. I mean, what I'm not sure what other what idea could be more powerful than that one. That's why people are reading the Bible there.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
Did Confucius live before Jesus?
Yes. Yeah. Before Jesus.
A few hundred years, I would think.
Yeah. Maybe like 400 or 500 years. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Wild. I can ask you a million questions, Dr. Kim. But maybe we can do this once a year.
Well, we could try. Yeah,
we can try. I know it's no, but I'm very grateful that you took your time. Thank you for saying yes. And I hope that we can stay in touch, and I'll send you some questions via email. And if you have any recommendations, what would be some good recommendations for your book, the Confucianism and the Philosophy of Well-Being. But is there like 2 or 3 books that you would recommend me? For beginners.
Yeah. There's this book by Thomas Nagel, and he's a great philosopher, really well respected. But he has a short little book on philosophy that I would recommend. And I was just trying to search for, I'll have to think more about it. But if you type in Thomas Nagel philosophy, I mean, he's written several books, but he has this beautiful little book that just gets at the basic, like, fundamental problems of philosophy. I should have prepared a little bit, and because I haven't read that book in a long time. What's another book? I mean, I'll have to think more about it. But
you can email me.
I mean, there's a lot of books that I love and would recommend, but I don't know if they're like, there's this book by Jonathan Lear. It's called The Desire to Understand. And it's a beautiful book on Aristotle that, but I wonder if it could be a little bit too hard, but he writes so well that I think it would be very, very much worth it. And the final, maybe one last book is by Harry Frankfurt. Harry Frankfurt has this tiny little book, which you can read through. It's actually called On Bullshit. And it's a great little book. Yeah. And really well written. Very accessible, philosophical. He was a philosophy professor at Princeton, but he wrote this little book, and it's kind of a classic. And it's actually like it'll give you a sense of how philosophers think through problems. Awesome.
And one last question: what is your favorite Confucius paraphrase or quote or?
Yeah. Well, there's a passage in the Analects that I've always really liked. So one of his students, Zegong is his name. So his student that he really likes, he thinks, oh, he's a good student. He works hard. So the student, he comes to Confucius according to the passage, and he says, Master, why don't we, it's by the way, the context is it's a time to do a lamb sacrifice. So once a month or so, they would do a lamb sacrifice to celebrate. And Zegong, his student, thought, isn't it kind of wasteful, right? Maybe we should stop doing the lamb sacrifice. And maybe we should, use the money in a better way. And Confucius, he sighs, and then he appreciates, his student's question. And he says in a very gentle way, he says, I understand, you care about the material benefit of saving the money, but I care about the ritual. And I thought that's really interesting because he's saying there's something that we lose by not doing the ritual. There's something sacred about it. I mean, it's not entirely clear what he had in mind, but there's something lost. There's something precious and valuable. And so, yeah, it's understandable. We save money. That's a kind of a good pragmatic,
Right.
businessman's perspective. But on the other hand, maybe that's not the only thing that matters in life. Maybe there are certain values that are important, apart from material goods.
So we should honor the rituals.
Well, not all rituals. I mean, that's what's tricky, right? Maybe there are bad rituals.
Yes.
Yeah. So, yeah.
All right. Well, thank you very much again. I'll be in touch once we get this out in the world of the World Wide Web. So I want to thank everybody, and we will see you next time.